Awesome. We're good to go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Ultimate BFCM Power Up by Mason. So we all know how BFCM and the holiday season kind of give brands a huge advantage in terms of getting a spike in online traffic and sales as well, if you kind of work that right. But what happens once the dust kind of settles down? So today we have a special guest, Louis Thompson. He is a CMO at Eastside Co, an award-winning e-commerce agency that's known for creating high-impact e-commerce experiences for Shopify merchants. So today, Louis and I are going to kind of talk about how you engage with your customers immediately after BFCM and even before BFCM to kind of, boost retention and propel your growth to the next level, basically. So, Louis, first of all, a warm welcome to you. Tell us a bit about yourself, what you do at Eastside, and how you help e-commerce teams.
Yeah, of course. So Eastside's been around for about 10 years. Previously a kind of a multi-platform agency, I suppose. So we would build on Magento, we build on WordPress and Shopify, and around 8 years ago, we made the decision to focus completely on Shopify. And that's been really great for us. Shopify has grown significantly. It's moved from being, a platform that was mainly for very small merchants into much more of an enterprise solution and something that's fit for everyone. And over that time, we've grown to, close to 100 people now. We cover everything e-commerce basically. So we have a great team of designers, really talented front-end developers, back-end developers, a great marketing team, and then obviously our account managers, project managers, basically covering everything you can think of e-commerce, digital. We cover it, and we focus on Shopify and direct to consumer. And our aim is, like you said, really just to create these high-impact experiences, whether that be through your website, through your marketing, and ultimately help merchants of all different sizes grow as quickly as they can and as sustainably as they can, I suppose.
Awesome. Kudos to your entire team. I just wanted to know, just curious, what has been some of the fun moments working as a CMO for an award-winning agency like Eastside?
Yeah, basically every site launch we celebrate. Every time we launch a site, we celebrate. I'm sure the whole team will say just after Black Friday, Cyber Monday is a moment of relief because everyone's super busy leading up to that, building campaigns. But the culture of the business and the people we get to work with every day are amazing. Really, that's always the best part of any job. I think is the people you get to work with every day, and I'm very lucky that they're all incredibly talented, and I get to learn lots of stuff from them every day, which is always fun.
That's amazing. That's a really sweet answer. Before we dive into the post-holiday retention, just wanted to know from you, what's your take on, because you mentioned BFCM, what's exciting about BFCM this year, especially with the cookieless and privacy world first looming and customer lifetime value coming front and center?
Yeah, I think Black Friday, Cyber Monday is always an interesting time because we see a couple of different approaches from brands. We see some people actively not taking part and talking about why they're not taking part. We see some people pushing really heavily during that time. And we seem to see consistently every year people starting slightly earlier and earlier to try and cut through the noise. So I think we'll see a similar trend this year with some brands starting earlier and either pushing a series of offers over the period as opposed to a single offer. It's a great time for brands because it feels like there's an opportunity for everyone to get something from it if you can get the right deal in place, if you can get the right messaging in place. But it's also fairly challenging because there is so much noise, because there's so much to cut through that you really have to be prepared and in advance. So I don't think we're going to see anything particularly revolutionary. I think it's a challenging time for brands anyway, because the cost of acquisition has gone up. So I think we'll see lots of people trying to use this to bring that down and get as many sales as they can in a short period. But I think by and large, we'll see a similar trend that we have done for the past couple of years, potentially with people starting even earlier with their offers just to try and get in there sooner. But I think it's going to be fairly similar trend. And I think some of the stuff hopefully we'll get to talk about today will help people figure out why it's exciting above and beyond just the couple of days that the sales are running for, and how they can prep for that, and also how they can think about what they do after that.
Got it. So you mentioned about brands cutting through the noise, and basically they'll have to kind of bring their CAC down. And that's where I feel where retention kind of comes in, right? So even though retaining your seasonal shoppers and converting them to, your loyal followers kind of might not seem like an easy task, you can achieve it with some right strategies and some out-of-the-box thinking as brands, right? So when do you think we need to start working on these retention strategies as brands? Do you think we need to start only after BFCM kind of ends? Or is it something that you need to kind of start slowly building up, probably before you even think about start acquiring customers, and why?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with lots of brands is that there's this obviously really heavy focus on acquisition. And this question comes up a lot, is like, when should we start trying to retain our customers? And the answer, if I'm honest, is always, if you haven't started, then today is the best time to start, right? Ideally, you will have started this in the past. So retention isn't something that just exists for particular seasons. It's something that has to be always on. So your Black Friday, Cyber Monday retention strategy, although there might be different segmentation and some slightly different tactical approaches because you're dealing with a slightly different audience, there should be a through line with your retention strategy, full stop. So if you don't have something in place to retain customers, whether that be a loyalty program, whether it be post-purchase emails, whether it be, more branded newsletters, whether it be, there's a whole range of things that you can think about doing there. Certainly those things at least need to be prepared. And retention starts from the first interaction that you have with a customer, right? It's about creating a consistent experience throughout. So the very first message that you have with a customer should be consistent with the very last message that you have with a customer. So you should be selling your product with retention in mind. And then post-purchase, you should be communicating with the customer to make sure they're getting the most out of their product. You should for sure be rewarding your loyal customers, whether that be through discounts, or whether it be through added value, whether it just be through content. All of these things should be in place anyway. When it comes to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, obviously you're dealing with a huge pool of acquired, potentially new people to your brand. The problem with that is that you're acquiring them very quickly, so they don't necessarily have a relationship with you as a brand specifically, right? They're buying based on price, and they're buying based on product. They're not buying into you because they like you specifically. So you have to build that relationship after the fact. So talking to them about your brand and why you exist and what's important to you, and recognizing that you're not going to retain all of those customers. Some of them will just be customers who bought for price, and that's it. That's the end of the relationship. But making sure that you're communicating with them post-purchase and actually building up a rapport with them after they've purchased, that's one of the keys to retaining the customer. You can't just do it with the loyalty program. You can't just do it with emails. It's got to be a combined strategy to make sure that you're communicating with them in all the places that they are, whether that be email, social, wherever they're having conversations about you or your product, making sure you have all of that covered, and making sure that you're offering value back. You've received value from them as a customer. It's time to give that back before you start asking for more again.
Got it. That's amazing. So you have kind of mentioned a bunch of things, right? So is there a specific list of must-haves, to-dos, checklists, or whatever, right, for nurturing and retaining your customers? Let's say in terms of, having proper tech stack ready, or having the right skills in place, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think if I had to choose just one, there's lots of things you can do, right? Having a loyalty program in place is great, but often loyalty programs are for customers who have already gone, they're looking at being repeat customers. They're already customers who have a certain amount of loyalty to you, and so they want to join a program to keep getting rewards for that loyalty. So it's not always the right thing for a customer who's initially just come to you for a one-off purchase. But email marketing and potentially SMS marketing, those two things combined, are a really powerful tool to continue the conversation with customers. So if you're thinking about, if we look at Black Friday, Cyber Monday specifically, where we do have this pool of newly acquired customers, having something like Klaviyo in place or Dot Digital, some kind of email marketing platform, and having automation flows set up specifically segmented to customers, whether it's first-time customers that purchased from you over the period, making sure that you have a really solid automation flow that continues the conversation with them after their initial purpose, is personalized as possible and is as specific as possible to their behavior on your site, their purchase behavior, and taking them through that over a period of time before you start trying to cross-sell and upsell and turn them into ongoing customers. I think that's a key thing there. Often that's something that people think about after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? They go, okay, that's ended. What can we do with these customers? Oh, let's send them some emails. Let's send them some SMS messages, whatever that might be. But if you set that up, if you plan that properly and set it up beforehand, then from the moment they purchase, you can communicate with that customer almost for free, basically. It's very, very cheap. Certainly email, SMS is a little bit more costly, but not hugely. You can communicate with that customer for free for as long as they're subscribed. If you're thinking about that after the fact, then it takes a lot of resource and manpower to actually get those communications out. If you think about it and plan beforehand and automate that process with some fairly simple decision trees to say, if a customer does this, then send them down this route. If they do this, then send them down the other route. If you can set that up beforehand, that's really powerful. So if somebody purchases a product, you've got your standard transactional emails that might come out from Shopify to say, this is being delivered, this is being shipped, but then you've got all your kind of marketing-based emails. I always use companies that sell like consumables. So say you're a vitamin brand, for example. The biggest reason that someone's not going to purchase from you again is that they have too much of the product, so that they're not taking their daily vitamins. So when it comes to the time to replenish, they still have some left. They weren't happy with the quality of the product, which is an opportunity to get some good feedback. Or they don't want to spend more money, right? Those are usually three reasons. They didn't like the product, they got too much of the product, or they don't have the money to continue purchasing. The ideal thing that you can do is with a consumable run like that is make sure they're getting the most out of the product. Talk to them about what the product does for them. Make sure they're taking it daily. If they're not using it yet, if they're not continuing their subscription, asking why. Actually having a conversation with the customer and getting feedback. If you start that from the moment they purchase and start talking to them about the benefits and the reasons, and making sure that they get over that, buyer's remorse that they might have because they've just bought loads of products over the sale period. If you can continue to communicate with them and show them the benefits of the products and make sure they're getting the most out of it, and when it does come time to purchase again, or when it does time to cross-sell, they've seen a lot of value from you in that period. So I think email is a really powerful way to do that. Of course, you can take you can take that purchaser data, you can put it into Google, you can put it into Facebook, you can put it into into a variety of platforms to create remarketing audiences. But you're almost going down the route of acquisition again then. But certainly getting them into your social platforms, getting them to revisit your website, getting them to consume your content, and just continuously adding value. That's a really great thing to do. And email and SMS is still a really, really powerful way to do that. And providing customers have an expectation that you're going to be communicating with them through email and SMS, that should be really well received.
Awesome, got it. So yeah, email and communications is it's like a big game changer, for brands today, right? So you also mentioned something about automating some of these communications, right? So apart from communications, are there any other spaces where automation can be leveraged when it comes to retention?
Yeah, I think certainly some of your, there's some really great loyalty platforms out there. that will, whether there's elements of automation that can be involved in there. So, the redemption of loyalty points, if you set up different tiers, so, your gold, silver, bronze tier customers, for example, dependent on spend level, moving them between different tiers, and automating the communications that come off the back of that loyalty program as well. I think there's a lot of automation that can be done there. And I think there's also an opportunity with loyalty programs to do something a bit different, right? I think there's a lot that's been done with loyalty that's just points for prizes is how we would describe it. So, you get some points and you can get some vouchers, but there's lots of companies out there, certainly with sustainable messaging, that are doing things like you can use your loyalty points to give to a charity. You can use your loyalty points to plant a tree. There's interesting things that you can do in that space. But, I think certainly when I look at automation, right, I always try and think about it in terms of, is it going to add value to the customer, and is it going to add value to you as a business? Because I think it needs to tick both of those boxes. So we see more and more people automating a lot of their kind of business functions, which gives their team more space to focus on customer retention, to focus on product development, to focus on, important things that are going to increase customer retention, although they're not directly related. So I think that should be the focus of automation. And then simple tasks that just, that where a human doing it is not going to add significant value to the team or the customer. So anything with the loyalty program where you're just automatically moving people between tiers, where you're encouraging people to move through those tiers, where you're encouraging people to utilize their loyalty points or whatever that might be, whatever function you're using, all of that stuff should be automated. And that way it means it's much more personalized to the customer. They're not just receiving the same email as everyone else or the same alert as everyone else. It's specific to where they are in the loyalty program and what they're doing.
That's amazing. That's just perfect. I mean, ultimately it depends on whether automation is basically adding value to your business or not, right?
Yeah.
So now coming to some of these strategies, you have already mentioned a couple of them: remarketing, emails, reward programs, loyalty programs, and so on and so forth. What are some of these top battle-tested retention strategies, let's say top 2-3 retention strategies that you would kind of want to share with brands that they can plug and play this holiday season? And do you think it will also kind of vary across industries, or will it remain the same?
I think strategy, certainly the principles of retention, we talked through, a good chunk of them across email and loyalty programs. And kind of add some more kind of less tangible things like adding value to your customers. I think the principles remain the same. How you actually, the tactical way that you implement those may change industry by industry. Like I said, the expectations of a fast fashion brand versus a haute couture brand are going to be very different in terms of what the customer expects. A fast fashion brand, there is an expectation that customers will be cycling through the product very, very quickly. It's not necessarily a massively considered decision when they purchase. So your communications and all the kind of the strategies and tactics we discussed, they can be much more frequent. Whereas if you're a very, very expensive couture, custom design clothing brand, then the expectation that your customers have is very, very different. They don't want to be hammered with emails every day. They're not necessarily going to be purchasing from you 3 or 4 times a month in the same way that someone would from a fast fashion brand. So the kind of frequency and the deployment of the tactics will change industry by industry. But I think fundamentally it comes down to what are your customers, what products are you selling? What are your customers looking to get out of the product? And how can you best make sure that your customers are getting as much value from you as a brand and the product itself as they possibly can? Do they understand all the different features of the product? Do they understand what you as a brand stand for? Do they understand what your values are as a brand? Do they resonate with those values? All of those things are really important if we're looking at lifetime value and loyalty as a customer. You're loyal to brands that you resonate with on a deeper level than this is what they sell, right? So I always look at iPhone versus Android. The reason that people buy an iPhone that is, I mean, maybe not these days, but historically an iPhone used to be significantly more expensive than an Android phone. From a technology perspective, they were fairly similar. So the Android argument was always, why would you buy the iPhone when you could buy the Android for half the cost and it would have better technology? But people weren't buying an iPhone just purely because of the technology. They were buying it because they resonated with the company. They were people that felt like they were creatives. It was a status symbol. It was all of these things, right? I don't know if you remember when the iPhone first came out, but having sent from my iPhone and the bottom of your email was a little bit of a status symbol. Everybody deletes it now, but it used to be a thing to let people know that you've got an iPhone. So you bought into that brand for more than just the fact that they sold a phone, right? That they sold a phone. It was you resonated with Steve Jobs, you resonated with the business, and that's the reason you bought. And it's also the same reason that people bought into Android phones. They resonated with, more open source technology, and their kind of belief system focused more on that side. So those things are really important, but they're not tangible. There's nothing I can say to anyone where I say, if you go and write these words and send this email, you're going to get all of your customers to be retained. What you really need to understand is what the values of your business are, and make sure that you're communicating them, and make sure your customers are getting absolutely the most out of you and your products that they possibly can. And sometimes that isn't about them buying the next thing. It's about them understanding how they can get more out of the current thing that they've got. And then when the time comes to upgrade or to buy the next subscription or whatever that might be, they will continue, So focus on more deeper kind of emotional connections, I think, than simply looking for the next tactic or the next platform. Otherwise, you'll just continue to cycle through the same tactics that you have been. It will just be that, oh, we don't do acquisition on Facebook anymore. We do it on TikTok now because that's the new thing. And when TikTok gets more expensive, you move on to the thing that comes after that, and you go through this ever-changing cycle of moving from platform to platform, chasing the return on ad spend that you used to get 3 or 4 years ago.
Got it. That's perfect. I mean, your answer kind of leads me to the next question in some way. I mean, most folks, what I've heard from is like, basically they say loyalty programs today are dead, right? I mean, for me, rewarding your customers with exciting perks, I mean, it would be the best way to kind of keep them happy and satisfied, right? But even then, for most brands, it's not relevant. And your answer kind of to the previous question is kind of relevant, probably is relevant here as well. It kind of depends on your business, if it's adding value to your business or not. So what's your thought on that? Loyalty programs, are they actually dead, or is it just for a few brands per se?
I think, I don't know, maybe these are the same people that are saying email is dead and SEO is dead and all of these things. I think every marketing tactic has died at some point over the past 10 years, according to various people. I think what people actually mean, whether they know it or not, is that the current way that most people are using loyalty programs is not viable. So the stuff I was talking about earlier, in terms of you spend £5, you get 500 points, and then you exchange those 500 points for a voucher or something. So yeah, that has been done a lot, and it's been done to death, and that can still be valuable for some merchants, right? Not every merchant is a big enterprise brand that's turning over 20, 30, 40 million pounds a year. Some people, sub million revenue or even less, they're not necessarily in a position where they can launch big complex loyalty schemes that are heavily personalized. So it's still valuable for them to have something in place rather than nothing. But I think if you look at some of the technology partners in the loyalty space now and how they're working, that they're doing much more interesting things. And I think it all comes back to, again, the same thing is your loyalty program, is it just like an add-on? Is it just an app that you've installed and clicked plug and play and just click go and not really given it any attention? Or is it something that's actually going to add value to your audience? So, it might be that the loyalty program at a certain point gives them access to a VIP event. If you're a fashion brand and your top 100 customers get invited to your I'm not a fashion guy, right? So some of these words may not make sense, but I'll do my best. If you get invited to the launch of the winter collection, for example, and they invite you to this VIP party, and there's a catwalk show, and there's drinks, and there's canapes, and they get to meet the models and the photographer and the designers, and that to me is an amazing experience, right? If I was really heavily connected with a brand, and I got to go and have an in-person experience that created a memory that was unforgettable, you're in the realm there where you're starting to turn people just from people who buy your products into people who are advocates to your products, right? That's an experience that they'll continue to talk about forever and ever. So if you use your loyalty programs like that to go above and beyond what people's expectations are, they can be super valuable. If you're just saying here's a £5 voucher, then it's you're just doing what everyone else does. You're marketing by numbers, right? You're just looking at what the competition does and following them. You can get your loyalty program and the perks of your loyalty program to be heavily ingrained within what your brand stands for and really reward your customers above and beyond their expectations. And of course, that's going to be valuable. But you've got to create something that is going to be memorable for them, something that they want to talk about. And that's the way you get people from being people who buy your products into people who are advocates or evangelists for your products.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, in short, nothing is dead as long as it's adding value to your business and as long as you're creating value for your customers. Yeah, I mean, you should definitely not hesitate going ahead with that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
So moving ahead, talking about challenges when it comes to retention, right? We have seen that in the battle between acquisition and retention, merchants kind of almost always tend to choose the former. They focus on the former, right? And you even said in the beginning about brands not actively taking part in BFCM this year because CAC is super high and so on and so forth, right? So what stops merchants from focusing on retention? And do you think it's entirely based on priorities again?
The really transparent and honest answer is that most brands think short term, right? There are very few brands out there are thinking about long-term strategies. Sometimes if you ask a brand, what are your goals for the next 12 months? It's a difficult question for them to answer. Never mind what are your goals for the next 5 years. And if you look at the total customer journey, so everything from acquiring a customer through their kind of consideration phase where they're looking at you versus competitors versus the acquisition stage and then post-purchase and loyalty and all these different elements of the customer journey, most merchants actually just deal with the middle bit, just the kind of acquisition and sale. So they say, yes, we want to do data segmentation, we want to do loyalty programs, but right now we just need to make more sales. And the problem is the future never comes, right? They're always in a position where right now they just need to make more sales. So they get really hyper focused on what today and tomorrow looks like without thinking about what 3 or 6 months down the road looks like. It's the same reason why people don't invest properly in tactics like SEO, because they don't see the results of that for 3 or 6 months. There's a bunch of other reasons with that where it's got a bit of a shady history and people don't necessarily trust it. But if you've got a really good SEO agency, I know that my SEO team at Eastside, for example, I know that they can get you really great results in 6 months' time, but they don't want to invest in that because they want to invest in things that are going to get them money right now. But of course, it's a really good time to give an example for this, because even 12 months, 2 years ago, you could acquire customers very, very cheaply on Facebook and Instagram, right? You could just throw money at that platform and it would give you, anywhere between 5 to 10 to 1 returns in terms of the money you spent on it. And we're down the road 2 years later, and the platforms, the brands that are completely built off of acquisition through paid Facebook and Instagram ads are really struggling now because their acquisition costs, have gone through the roof. There are products that we helped to sell 3-4 years ago that the cost per acquisition was, £10-15 for a £300 product. And, now you struggle to do that for 50, 60 pounds to sell a single product. So it's a really difficult conversation to have with everyone, because of course everyone wants to make more money now, and cash flow is really important for businesses. But I think to go from being someone who sells a product into being a brand, a true brand that has the ability to create legacy, you have to stop thinking short term. You have to start thinking at least medium and long term. So I think that's why people focus on acquisition as opposed to loyalty, because acquisition has an impact now, like immediately, whereas loyalty might take 12 months to have an impact, especially if you're selling a product that has, the kind of rebuy rate is very low. So, people might buy from you once a year. But I think, that customer retention bit is so important, but it requires people to step out of the day-to-day of their business and focus on what the business might look like in 12 months or 2 years or 5 years. Things like, these long-term strategies like loyalty and SEO, those are things, and conversion rate optimization and things like this, those are things that will continue to have an impact and continue to accumulate over time. So the earlier you start doing them, the bigger the impact will be. It's that old story of, if you have a straight line and at the base of that line, you adjust it by just 1 degree, much further down the line, the distance seems vast, but you only had to make a small change at this point. So I think as long as you're taking steps to implement those things, that's better than doing nothing. But certainly getting out of that mindset of thinking, how do we make more money today, or how do we make more money tomorrow, and start thinking about how we make more money in 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, and forecasting that out, then for sure, I think that will put people in a better position.
Got it. So Louis, I kind of also believe one of the biggest challenges that merchants kind of face while improving retention, or why? Because they think short term instead of thinking long term, is basically the lack of data today, right? And it's kind of wildly difficult to track retention. And even if you have the data, it's kind of super difficult to kind of track it, right? So what's the significance of BFCM data? How can merchants leverage BFCM data in such cases, and how can they sift through it?
I think with all data, the interesting thing about data, right, is it tells you what's happened in the past. It doesn't tell you what's happening in the future. So it's definitely an indicator, but it's not. And I've been guilty of this myself. And I think everyone who's built their career or their business in the digital age is super data obsessed. And I think there's a risk that we may go too far down that road. There's lots of methods of acquisition, and there's lots of methods of getting new customers that you can't directly attribute. Every marketer's dream is to have this single customer view and understand exactly the journey that they went through to get to a purchase, and to try and find correlation across your whole customer database about how they did that. But that is incredibly difficult to do. So I think there is something to be said, and this is, old school marketing methodology would be, we're going to put this in the right place and put it in front of as many people as we can. And if down the road we see an uplift in sales, we will anecdotally relate those two things together. We put this magazine ad out and we saw an uplift in sales here. And if we do that again, we should see another uplift in sales. I think there is something to be said about that in the digital age, in terms of just trusting and anecdotally relating events to increase in sales. However, that's not to say we should ignore data. I'm just saying we shouldn't be completely dependent on it. That's why I was talking about earlier. If you build a brand, say you buy a product from me and I have a great loyalty program, and I invite you to a VIP event and you have an amazing time. You might go and tell 10, 20 of your friends about not just the product, but the business and what we do and what we stand for, and all of those things, and talk about this amazing experience you had. Now, if those 10 people go and buy from me, I have no way to relate that back to you. I might be able to say, hey, I invited you to this event a year ago, and 6 months later, I saw these 10 people buy. It's really difficult to do that, but it's still effective, right? So I have to trust that having that kind of impact, and I have to have faith that having that kind of impact on lots of individuals within my customer base will have a further impact down the line. So there's a lot to be said for that. I think in terms of Black Friday, Cyber Monday data specifically, I think what it can be is a really good indicator for you in terms of what kind of customers might buy from you. So to start with, I would have that segmented for sure, and I would keep it separate to my main customer database, so I fully understand that all of those customers have come through this kind of activity. And then through those automation flows that we talked about earlier, what I'd start to do is I'd whittle that down into try and understand who are the customers who just bought because it was cheap, who are the customers who have potential to become ongoing loyal customers, and who are customers that we'll never see again. There's going to be a couple of different segments, and you can do that through some just through your automation. So you can look at who's engaging, who continues to engage, who drops off. You can send out another discount, see who engaged with that. You can start to assess what kind of customers they are. There'll be a section of those customers that will move from your Black Friday, Cyber Monday list, and they'll move into your main customer list because they'll almost transfer themselves. They'll engage with emails, they'll purchase again, they'll engage with content, they'll revisit the site. All of those behaviors might move those customers from a Black Friday, Cyber Monday list into your main customer pool, and you can continue to communicate with them as you would your wider customer base. The customers who just buy based on price, they may not be long-term loyal customers, but at least you know how to communicate with them. You know the things that will interest them. So if you do have promotions and discounts, if you want to make some quick revenue, there's a customer list there for you. And then the customers who aren't engaging at all and literally just bought from you because they needed a lawnmower or a hedge trimmer or whatever that might be, and they're just going to buy one and you'll never see them again. It's good to know at least you've made some revenue off them. Hopefully you can segment those customers and you don't have to waste time and effort in engaging with them on a regular basis, because they are not going to be engaged customers. So it's like any data, right? If you're going to use it, you need to understand it. You need to understand the customer behind it. So try to work through those automation flows and set up your automation flows and your movement between those different flows in a way where the customers who can become regular customers get moved into that way, the customers who are price-based customers get moved into that list, and customers who are not engaged at all get moved into a less regular, more inactive list where maybe you only communicate with them a couple of times a year on big sale season stuff. So that's how I would view it. Of course, you can take that data, and the more segmented it is, the better. Of course, take that data, use it throughout Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Keep feeding that data back into your Facebook and Instagram and Google ads, because the more data you can get into those, the more intelligent those things will become. This is why owned data is so important, right? Because tracking on platforms has become less reliable, which is why we've seen an increase in cost per acquisition and all of those things. So use it as much as you can over the period, but once the period is over, start to try and segment that data and move it into the right places so that the customers who do want to hear from you more regularly continue to do so, and you can build a relationship with them. And the customers who don't want to hear from you don't hear from you. And the customers who are price-based, you can hit them when Christmas comes again with maybe another discount and try and drive some more revenue for gifting and that kind of thing.
Got it. That's perfect. Actually, I was going to ask you if you can kind of share a framework for our listeners, how they can, set up all these automation flows, how they can segment all the customers, but you've kind of pretty much answered this. So yeah, that's pretty perfect. Louis, just to kind of round up, in your view, are there any brands that you think might have killed it when it comes to post-BFCM retention? Whatever we have talked about so far, the strategies that you've mentioned, are there any examples that you would love to share?
I'm sure there's lots out there. I think that the one to point to, certainly on Shopify and certainly in the UK, and they're globally expanding now, but Gymshark is always a really good example of a brand who have done really well across the board. So they've utilized influencer marketing, they've utilized paid marketing, content marketing, in-person events, pop-ups, PR, and always do incredibly well on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. based on, the public information. I don't have any insider information on Gymshark specifically, but they always seem to do very well. And people have really bought into the brand. They're not just buying, they're bought into the brand in the same way that they're buying into Nike or, Under Armour. It's very much up there with the big players in that space now. And that is a brand that started off very small and, started off, just basically selling t-shirts out of a back bedroom kind of thing, out of a garage. So, they're really good guys to look to in terms of the content they put out, how their kind of values as a business. The kind of content they're putting out is phenomenal. It's always slightly different in terms of the look and feel of it. It really stands out in terms of their assets across the sales season. So they've always got a really good campaign. It's always a very big campaign. And they're, as well as acquiring new customers, they're also dealing with their existing customers. I think they always come closest to bringing Shopify down over the Black Friday, Cyber Monday period. So, they're really good people to look to, producing great content. Just a good overall brand, I think, to take some lessons from.
Amazing. I've always been a big fan of their brand, and you have just shared the same example. So thank you so much.
Good.
We're right on time. Louis, thank you so much for these wonderful insights. And to all the listeners out there, one of my key takeaways from this conversation is that even though it's kind of tempting to kind of sit back once you are done with the great holiday season sale and so on, now's the time to kind of start nurturing these long-term relationships, right? Study them, like Louis said, get to know them. They're not saying short-term. Start building your own community from now on. And that way you'll kind of keep them coming back even into the new year. So yeah, that was an absolutely splendid conversation with you, Louis. Thanks so much. Do let our viewers know how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, of course. If you need any support over Black Friday, Cyber Monday, whether that be a quick website build, whether it be marketing, creative support, whatever you need, you can go to eastsideco.com and you can jump onto the contact page there and get in touch, and one of our team will get back to you super quickly. We have some really great products and stuff that will help you launch a new site very, very quickly, new landing pages. People always need support over Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So any support you need across anything e-commerce, give us a shout. And if you want to speak to me directly, you can get me through that same method, and someone will nudge me and I'll pick up the emails.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Louis. Have a nice day.